The dinner plate slipped from my fingers, shattering against the marble floor in 1,000 pieces. The sound echoed through our dining room, but I barely heard it over the rushing in my ears. My stepdaughter Meredith stood across from me, her chin lifted in that defiant way I'd come to know over the past 3 years, her hands protectively cradling her stomach. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I'm pregnant with Dad's baby, she repeated, each word deliberate and cold. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline to this sick joke. At 19, Meredith had my husband Daniel's sharp green eyes and calculating nature, but surely even she couldn't. What? The word came out as barely a whisper. You heard me, Catherine. She moved closer, her designer heels clicking on the floor, carefully avoiding the scattered porcelain. 3 months along. Dad's been comforting me since Mom died. My legs felt like water. I gripped the edge of the dining table, my knuckles white against the dark wood. Daniel and I had been married for 3 years. 3 years of what I thought was happiness, of building a life together in this sprawling estate in Connecticut. 3 years of trying to be a stepmother to his teenage daughter, who'd lost her mother to cancer just months before we met. You're lying. My voice was stronger now, anger beginning to pierce through the shock. This is another one of your games, Meredith. Another attempt to drive me away. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Oh, Catherine, always so naive. Why do you think Dad works so late? Why do you think he built me that apartment over the garage last year, for privacy? She pulled out her phone, swiping through it with manicured nails. Would you like to see the ultrasound? Or maybe the texts? He's quite poetic when he wants to be. Stop. I held up my hand, bile rising in my throat. Just stop. The baby's due in March, she continued, unmoved by my distress. Dad's already made arrangements. A trust fund, private doctors, the works. He's quite excited about having another child. Says it will be like starting over, doing things right this time. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it like this video, it means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The room spun. I thought of this morning, Daniel kissing my forehead before leaving for his investment. Firm, promising to be home early for our anniversary dinner. Our 3rd anniversary. The table was still set with candles and our wedding china. Get out, I whispered. This is my father's house, Meredith said coolly. I think you're the one who should leave. Dad will be home soon. We can all discuss this. Like adults. I'm sure you'll want to know about the divorce proceedings. Dad's lawyer has already drawn up the papers. Irreconcilable differences, of course, much cleaner than adultery. I looked at this girl, this child I'd tried so hard to love, to mother, to understand. She'd been 16 when Daniel and I met, still reeling from her mother's death. I'd bent, over backwards, trying to give her space, to not replace her mother, to be a friend first. Now she stood before me, claiming to carry my husband's child, wearing the emerald necklace I'd noticed missing last month. That's mine, I said, pointing to the necklace. She touched it, smiling. Dad gave it to me. Said emeralds match my eyes better than yours anyway. The casual cruelty of it broke something inside me. But instead of tears, I felt a strange calm descending. The same calm I'd felt 20 years ago when I discovered my first husband's betrayal. The same calm that had carried me through rebuilding my life, establishing my consulting firm, becoming successful enough that men like Daniel pursued me. Where's Maria? I asked, thinking of our housekeeper who lived in the staff quarters. Dad gave her the week off, said we needed privacy for our anniversary. Meredith's smile was sharp. Surprise? I moved carefully around the broken plate, my heels steady on the floor. In the hallway mirror, I caught my reflection. 42 years old, successful, poised. The prenuptial agreement I'd insisted on despite Daniel's protests flashed through my mind. My lawyer had called me paranoid. I'd called it prudent. "Tell Daniel I'll send movers for my things," I said, walking toward the stairs, running away. "Already?" Meredith called after me. "I thought you'd fight for him. Mom would have fought." I paused at the bottom of the stairs, my hand on the banister. "Your mother was a saint to put up with what she did. I'm not your mother." Upstairs, I moved with methodical precision. The wall safe in my office opened with my thumbprint. Daniel didn't even know it existed. Inside were the documents that mattered: my passport, business papers, the backup drives, containing 5 years of my company's data, and the leather journal I'd kept since our wedding day. 3 years of observations, documented oddities, small inconsistencies I'd dismissed as grief or stress or my own imagination. I pulled out my suitcase, the one I'd arrived with before Daniel had bought me designer luggage I'd never liked. My hands were steady as I packed only what I'd brought into this marriage: my clothes, my grandmother's jewelry, the photo albums from my life before Daniel. Everything else could stay. My phone buzzed. Daniel's name appeared on the screen. "Traffic is terrible, darling. I'll be home in an hour. Is everything ready for our celebration?" I didn't respond. Instead, I screenshot the message and added it to a folder I'd been unconsciously building. Late-night texts, canceled plans, receipts that didn't quite add up. In my jewelry box, I found the emerald necklace's twin, the one Daniel had given me last Christmas, claiming it was one of a kind. Another lie to add to the pile. I left it on the dresser with my wedding rings. The house felt different as I descended the stairs one last time, pulling my suitcase behind me. This wasn't my failure. It was my escape. Meredith was gone from the dining room, but I could hear her in the kitchen, humming while she made tea in my favorite mug. I stopped in Daniel's study, knowing he kept the spare key to his desk in the antique cigar box. The drawer slid open silently, revealing the files he thought were so well hidden. Banking documents, but not the ones I expected. Transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, dated long before Meredith's supposed pregnancy. Property deeds for houses I'd never seen. And underneath it all, a will dated last month leaving everything to my children, plural. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my lawyer, returning my after-hours call. "Linda," I said quietly, "I need you to freeze all joint accounts immediately and pull up that prenup. Yes, I know what time it is. Just do it." I photographed every document before replacing them exactly as I'd found them. 3 years of marriage, and I was just now seeing clearly. The signs had been there: Meredith's increasing boldness, Daniel's growing distance, the way certain household items went missing only to reappear in unexpected places. I'd attributed it all to a troubled teenager and a stressed businessman. The parking garage held my BMW, the one thing I'd refused to let Daniel replace with something more suitable for his wife. It started smoothly, purring to life with the reliability I'd always valued. In the rearview mirror, I watched the house recede, its perfect facade hiding the rot within. My phone rang as I reached the highway. Daniel's photo flashed on the screen, the one from our wedding day. I let it go to voicemail. "Catherine, where are you? Meredith said you had an argument. This is ridiculous. Come back and we'll sort this out. Whatever she told you, I'm sure it's a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding. The word almost made me laugh. I drove toward the city, toward the apartment I'd quietly kept for business purposes, the one Daniel had mocked as unnecessary. The roads were familiar even in the dark, each mile putting distance between me and the revelation that my life had been a carefully orchestrated lie. At a red light, I pulled up my banking app. The joint accounts were already frozen, Linda working with her usual efficiency. My personal accounts, the ones Daniel had no access to, showed exactly what I expected, enough to start over 100 times if necessary. I'd learned long ago never to depend entirely on anyone else for security, Another call from Daniel. Another voicemail. "This is insane, Catherine. You can't just leave. We have a life together. Meredith's going through a phase. You know how she is. Please, let's talk about this reasonably." Reasonably. As if there was a reasonable explanation for his daughter claiming to carry his child. As if there was a reasonable explanation for the documents in his desk, the lies upon lies I was only now beginning to unravel. The city lights grew brighter as I approached, each one a promise of the life I'd built before Daniel, the life that waited for me still. My phone continued to ring. Daniel, then unknown numbers that were probably his attempts to get through. I turned it off, letting the silence fill the car. Tomorrow there would be lawyers and questions and the messy business of untangling 3 years of marriage. Tonight, there was only the road ahead and the growing certainty that I'd escaped something far worse than a cheating husband. As I pulled into the underground parking of my building, the security guard nodded in recognition. "Good evening, Ms. Chen? Working late again?" "Something like that, Robert," I replied, grateful he'd never switched to calling me Mrs. Mitchell. The elevator rose smoothly to the penthouse, to the apartment that still smelled like home despite months of absence. I set down my suitcase and walked to the windows overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, Daniel was arriving home to find me gone, to face his daughter and whatever truth lay behind her horrifying claim. But that was no longer my concern. I poured myself a glass of wine from the bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. If escaping a house of lies wasn't worth celebrating, I didn't know what was. My laptop powered on, and I began making lists, calls to make, accounts to secure, aspects of my life to untangle from Daniel's. It was after midnight when exhaustion finally overtook adrenaline. But before I slept, I sent one text to the number I knew Meredith monitored obsessively. "The house is yours. May you both be very happy together." Then I blocked every number associated with my soon-to-be former life and fell into the first peaceful sleep I'd had in months. Tomorrow would bring challenges, revelations, and the hard work of rebuilding. But tonight, I was free. The buzzing of my phone woke me before dawn. Not my personal phone, that remained blissfully silent with all the blocks I'd put in place. This was my business line, the one only my closest associates had. Linda's name flashed on the screen. "Catherine, you need to see the news," she said without preamble. I fumbled for the remote, switching on the bedroom television. The local morning news filled the screen, and there was Daniel's face, a corporate headshot from his firm's website. The headline below made my blood run cold. "Investment firm CEO Daniel Mitchell under investigation for embezzlement." "It broke an hour ago," Linda continued. "The FBI raided his offices last night. Apparently, they've been building a case for months. Client funds diverted, fraudulent investments, the works. Catherine, how much did you know about his business dealings?" "Nothing," I said, my mind racing. "He always kept his work separate. Said it was too boring to discuss at home. Well, thank God for that prenup. It clearly establishes your assets as separate. But Catherine, they're going to want to talk to you. You need representation beyond just divorce proceedings now." I was already out of bed, pulling on clothes while processing this new information. The documents I'd photographed last night took on new meaning. Were those mystery accounts where he'd hidden stolen funds? How long had he been planning this? "There's more," Linda said, her voice careful. "The FBI age." "There's more," Linda said, her voice careful. "The FBI agents who raided his office found some disturbing personal documents. Catherine, they're going to ask about Meredith, about their relationship." I sank onto the edge of my bed, phone pressed to my ear. "What kind of documents?" "I don't have all the details yet, but my contact at the bureau mentioned photographs, financial records showing large transfers to her personal accounts, and..." She paused. "Medical records. Fertility clinic records, to be specific." The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the phone tighter, forcing myself to breathe evenly. When? The records go back 2 years, right around the time of her 17th birthday. 17. She'd been 17 when it started. My stomach churned as memories reshuffled themselves into a darker pattern. The sudden end to her therapy sessions, Daniel insisting she needed space to grieve privately, the weekend trips they took together for father-daughter bonding, the way she'd started looking at me not with teenage resentment, but with the calculating gaze of a rival. I need to call you back, I managed. Catherine, don't go anywhere alone. Don't contact them. Let me handle— I hung up and ran to the bathroom, barely making it before being violently ill. When the heaving stopped, I sat on the cool tile floor, my mind racing through 3 years of carefully ignored warning signs. My phone buzzed with texts from Linda, but I couldn't focus on them yet. Instead, I opened my laptop and began searching through the photos I'd backed up from our shared cloud storage before leaving. There they were, innocent-looking family photos that now held sinister undertones. Meredith's hand on Daniel's arm at her high school graduation, possessive rather than affectionate. The way they stood too close at my company's holiday party. How she always positioned herself between us in group photos. A loud knock at my door made me jump. Through the security monitor, I saw 2 people in dark suits holding FBI badges. Ms. Chen? We need to speak with you about your husband, Daniel Mitchell. I took a moment to compose myself, splashing cold water on my face and pulling my hair back. When I opened the door, I was Catherine Chen, CEO and survivor, not the shattered wife I'd been moments before. I've been expecting you, I said, stepping aside to let them in. Though I should clarify, he's my soon-to-be ex-husband. I left him last night. The agents exchanged glances. The woman, Agent Sarah Park, spoke first. That's actually why we're here. We understand there was an incident yesterday evening. Your stepdaughter made certain claims. I gestured for them to sit in my living room, buying time by offering coffee they declined. She claimed to be pregnant with Daniel's child, yes. And you believed her? Agent Park's partner, a younger man named Agent Torres, had his notebook out. I didn't want to, I said carefully. But given what I discovered in Daniel's private files last night, combined with patterns of behavior I'd been willfully ignoring, yes, I believed her. What files? Agent Park leaned forward. I retrieved my phone, showing them the photographs I'd taken. Financial documents, property deeds, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. I was looking for evidence of an affair. I found something much worse. They studied the images, Agent Torres typing rapidly on his tablet. Ms. Chen, we're going to need you to come to the office and make a formal statement. These documents could be crucial to our investigation. Course, I agreed. But first I need to know, is Meredith safe? Whatever's been done to her, she's still a teenager. Agent Park's expression softened slightly. She's been placed in protective custody while we sort this out. The pregnancy claim appears to be fabricated, by the way. The fertility clinic records show consultations and preliminary treatments, but no confirmed pregnancy. It seems the announcement was designed to destroy your marriage and drive you away. Why? The word came out cracked. Why would she? Based on what we've uncovered, it appears Mr. Mitchell was planning to disappear. The embezzled funds, the hidden properties, he was setting up a new life. Our working theory is that Meredith was meant to join him, and you were an obstacle to be removed. I thought of Meredith's confidence last night, her certainty that I would leave. They'd known exactly which buttons to push, which lies would be too horrific for me to verify before fleeing. The medical records, I said slowly. If she's not pregnant, then what? Egg harvesting and storage, Agent Torres said bluntly. Multiple procedures over the past 2 years. Whatever their relationship, they were planning for a future together. This time, I couldn't make it to the bathroom. Agent Park quickly handed me a wastebasket while Agent Torres got water from my kitchen. When the sickness passed, I found myself laughing. A broken, bitter sound. "I'm sorry," I said, wiping my eyes. "It's just, I spent 3 years trying to be a good stepmother. I read books, went to counseling, gave her space when she needed it and support when she'd accept it. And all that time? You couldn't have known," Agent Park said firmly. "These situations involve sophisticated manipulation and grooming. Based on our investigation, this started long before you entered the U. Picture. Meredith's mother's death may not have been as natural as reported." The words hit like physical blows. "What?" "We've ordered an exhumation and autopsy. Mrs. Mitchell's oncologist found some irregularities in her final months that were attributed to the cancer at the time. But given what we now know about Mr. Mitchell's activities..." I stood abruptly, needing to move, to do something with the energy coursing through me. "I need to make some calls. My company, my clients. If this goes public, the association with Daniel could..." "Ms. Chen," Agent Torres interrupted gently. "It's already public. The raid made headlines. Your phones are probably ringing off the hook." As if on cue, my business phone began buzzing insistently. I looked at it helplessly, seeing notification after notification piling up. "We can continue this at the office," Agent Park said, standing. "Take an hour to handle your immediate concerns. We'll send a car." After they left, I stood in my apartment feeling simultaneously numb and electrified. My life had imploded in less than 12 hours, but I was still standing. That had to count for something. I called my assistant first. "Margaret, I need you to schedule an emergency board meeting for this afternoon." "Yes, I've seen the news." "No. I had no knowledge of Daniel's business dealings. Have PR prepare a statement distancing the company from him completely." Next was my personal publicist, then my financial advisor, then the heads of my major client accounts. With each call, I felt more like myself, Catherine Chen, the woman who'd built a consulting empire from nothing, not Mrs. Mitchell, the foolish wife who'd missed every warning sign. Between calls, I showered and dressed in my sharpest suit, armor for the battle ahead. In the mirror, I looked older than yesterday, but also somehow clearer, as if a filter had been removed from my vision. My phone rang with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Catherine?" The voice was young, scared. "It's Meredith." I gripped the phone, a dozen responses fighting to emerge. Finally, I managed, "How are you calling me?" They gave me one phone call. I wanted to say I'm sorry. This isn't how it was supposed to happen." "How what was supposed to happen, Meredith? Your father stealing millions? You pretending to carry his child? Which part exactly didn't go according to plan?" She was crying now, the confident young woman from last night replaced by something more recognizable as a teenager. "He said if I played along, if I helped him get rid of you, we could be together properly. That society just didn't understand our connection. That once we were in Switzerland, everything would be different." "Switzerland," I repeated flatly. "He has a house there, has had it for years. We were going to," she hiccuped. "We were going to have babies, be a real family. He said you were just a necessary phase, someone respectable to hide behind while he moved the money." Each word was another nail in the coffin of my marriage, but I forced myself to listen. This broken child had been shaped by a master manipulator, molded into his accomplice and victim simultaneously. "Meredith, what happened to your mother?" A long pause. "I don't know. Dad said..." He said she was getting suspicious, that she might try to separate us, but I didn't. I swear I didn't know he would. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, then carefully set it down and walked to my window. The city stretched out below, indifferent to personal catastrophes. Somewhere out there, Daniel was in custody, his carefully constructed world crumbling. Meredith was facing her own reckoning. And I was here, caught between victim and survivor, with choices to make about who I'd be moving forward. My driver arrived exactly an hour after the agents left. I gathered my documents, my laptop, and the journal I'd kept throughout my marriage. Every instinct told me to hire the best lawyers and wash my hands of this mess, but something deeper, maybe conscience, maybe just stubborn curiosity, demanded, I see this through. The FBI office was a bland building that could have housed any corporate entity. Inside, I was led to a conference room where Agents Park and Torres waited with several others, including a woman who introduced herself as a specialist in family crimes. Before we begin, I said, settling into my chair with the poise that had carried me through hostile takeovers and corporate betrayals, I want to establish something clearly. I knew nothing about Daniel's financial crimes. Our assets were kept separate by prenuptial agreement. My company has no connection to his business. We're aware, Agent Park assured me. Your cooperation today is voluntary and appreciated. We're more interested in the personal dynamics that might shed light on the broader investigation. For the next 4 hours, I walked them through my marriage. Every strange moment, every dismissed concern, every sign I'd rationalized away. They showed me evidence that painted an even darker picture. Emails between Daniel and Meredith dating back to when she was 15, financial records showing he'd been siphoning money almost from the day we married, photographs from hidden, cameras in our home that made my skin crawl. Why marry me at all? I asked during a break, accepting coffee from Agent Torres. If they were all ready, why bring me into it? The family crimes specialist, Dr. Reeves, answered, You were perfect cover, successful, independent, above reproach. Your reputation protected his, and based on these communications, he enjoyed the game of it, fooling someone as intelligent as you seemed to be part of the appeal. I thought about our wedding day, how happy I'd been, how Daniel had whispered that I'd saved him from loneliness after his wife's death, how Meredith had been a beautiful bridesmaid, smiling for all the photos. There's something else, Agent Park said carefully. We've found evidence of other victims, young women who worked at his firm, daughters of business associates. The pattern goes back years, possibly to his first marriage. Meredith wasn't his first, though she appears to be the most involved. How many? My voice sounded strange to my own ears. We're still investigating. At least 12 that we can confirm so far. 12. I closed my eyes, thinking of all the company events, the family gatherings, the times I'd been in the same room with these girls and seen nothing. I want to help, I heard myself say. Whatever you need, financial records, testimony, access to our properties, I want to help put him away. The rest of the day blurred together. Statements, documents, evidence bags containing items from my life that now served as proof of crimes I'd never imagined. By the time they released me, the sun was setting again, marking the end of my first full day in this new reality. My driver was waiting, but I waved him off, needing to walk, to feel the city around me. My phone had been buzzing all day with calls and messages I'd ignored. The business would survive. I'd built it to run without me if necessary. The social fallout would pass. I'd weathered worse scandals, even if they hadn't been so personal. What haunted me was Meredith's voice on the phone, young and broken and sorry. She was a victim too, groomed by a predator who happened to be her father. But she was also a willing participant who'd helped destroy lives. The legal system would determine her culpability. I had to determine my own response. I found myself at a small park where Daniel and I had often walked on Sunday mornings. The bench where we'd sat planning our future was empty, and I settled onto it, watching joggers pass in the fading light. My phone rang. Linda again. This time I answered. The divorce papers are ready, she said without preamble. Given the circumstances, we can fast-track everything. You'll be free of him within weeks. Free. I tested the word, finding it didn't quite fit. You couldn't be free of something like this. Not entirely. It would always be part of my story now. The successful woman who'd married a monster and somehow missed all the signs. Catherine? Are you there? I'm here, I said, standing up from the bench. File the papers. And Linda? Start researching. Foundations that support victims of grooming and abuse. I have a feeling I'm going to be making some significant donations. Walking back through the city, I made mental lists. Therapy to schedule, friends to reconnect with, parts of my life to rebuild or discard. The apartment building appeared ahead, its lights a beacon of the safety I'd created for myself before Daniel, the sanctuary that had waited patiently for my return. Robert the security guard smiled as I entered. Long day, Ms. Chen? The longest. I agreed. But I'm home now. The word felt right in a way it hadn't in years. Not the house in Connecticut with its perfect facade and hidden corruptions, but this space I'd claimed as mine alone. I rode the elevator up, already planning the calls I'd make tomorrow, the steps I'd take to reclaim and rebuild. Inside my apartment, I poured wine and stood at the windows again, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere, Daniel was in a cell. Somewhere, Meredith was facing the consequences of choices made for her and by her. And here I stood, battered but not broken, ready to face whatever revelations tomorrow would bring. My reflection in the window showed a woman I recognized, not the polished wife I'd tried to be, but the fighter I'd always been underneath. I raised my glass to her, to survival and second chances, and the strength to see truth even when it came wrapped in devastation. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more evidence, more horrible discoveries about the man I'd thought I loved. But tonight, I was Catherine Chen again, and that was enough to build on. That was everything. The call came at 3 a.m., jarring me from restless sleep. Linda's name glowed on the screen, and I knew before answering that something had shifted in the case. Catherine, Daniel's dead. I sat up, instantly alert. What? How? Suicide. He managed to get hold of something in his cell. They found him an hour ago. Linda's voice was carefully neutral, giving me space to react however I needed. I felt nothing. No grief, no relief, just a hollow sensation where emotions should be. Meredith? She's been informed. From what I understand, she's been placed on suicide watch as a precaution. I was already out of bed, moving to my kitchen to make coffee. Sleep would be impossible now. This changes things. The criminal case will continue against his estate and any co-conspirators. But Catherine, he left a letter. The FBI wants you to see it. My hand stilled on the coffee pot. Addressed to me? To you? To Meredith? To his victims? It's comprehensive. Agent Park will bring you a copy this morning, but I wanted you to be prepared. He confesses to everything, including his first wife's murder. I sank onto a kitchen stool, the weight of this new revelation pressing down. He killed Meredith's mother, poisoned her gradually, made it look like the cancer was progressing faster than expected. He details the method, the timeline, everything. It's being verified, but the specifics match what the medical examiner found in the preliminary examination. The coffee maker gurgled to life, its normal sounds jarring against the horror of what I was learning. I thought of all the times Daniel had spoken about his late wife with seeming grief, the way he'd teared up at our wedding when mentioning how she would have wanted him to find happiness again. There's more, Linda continued. He claims there are other victims we don't know about yet. Girls from years ago, some who might not even realize they were victims. He kept records, Catherine. Detailed records hidden in a safety deposit box. He provides the location and access codes in his letter. Why? The word came out cracked. Why confess everything now? According to the letter, he knew he was caught. This was his way of controlling the narrative one last time. He wanted to be remembered as clever, thorough. It's all very clinical, very— She paused, searching for words. Proud. He's proud of what he did. I poured coffee with shaking hands, adding sugar I normally avoided, needing the sweetness to combat the bitterness rising in my throat. I want to see Meredith. Catherine, I don't think that's wise. She's 19 years old, Linda. Her father just killed himself after confessing to murdering her mother and destroying her life. Whatever she's done, she's alone now. Linda sighed. I'll see what I can arrange. But Catherine, you need to protect yourself too. The media is going to explode when this letter becomes public. You should consider leaving the city for a while. After we hung up, I stood at my window watching the city wake up. Rush hour was beginning, thousands of people starting their normal days while mine had taken another surreal turn. My phone was already buzzing with messages from reporters who somehow had gotten word of Daniel's death. Agent Park arrived at 7, looking as exhausted as I felt. She handed me a sealed envelope. This is your copy. I need to warn you. It's disturbing. I opened it at my dining table while she sat across from me, a silent support. Daniel's handwriting was neat, controlled, even in his final hours. The letter ran 15 pages, single-spaced, detailing crimes spanning 23 years. He wrote about his first victim, a 15-year-old student he'd tutored in economics, about how the thrill of manipulation had been more intoxicating than any physical encounter. He documented his methodology, identifying vulnerable girls, usually those with absent fathers or troubled home lives. The grooming process, the gradual escalation, the careful documentation he kept as trophies. Meredith's section was the longest. He'd begun grooming her when she was 13, right after diagnosing his wife with cancer. He wrote about manufacturing, situations where they'd be alone, about convincing her that their special bond was natural, even noble. The fertility treatments had been his idea, a way to bind her to him permanently, to create a child that would be purely theirs. He was a monster, I said finally, setting down the pages. An articulate, organized monster. One of the worst we've encountered, Agent Park agreed. But his confession will help us find and help his victims. Some of these girls, women now, might finally get closure. I thought about closure, wondered if such a thing was possible after this level of betrayal. What happens to Meredith now? She'll need extensive psychological evaluation. The prosecutors will have to determine how much of her participation was coerced versus willing. It's complicated when the perpetrator is also the parent, especially when the grooming started so young. I want to pay for her treatment, I heard myself say. The best facilities, the best doctors, whatever she needs. Agent Park studied me. That's generous, considering what she put you through. She was a child when this started. A child whose father killed her mother and then systematically destroyed her ability to have normal relationships. Yes, she made choices, terrible choices. But they were made within a framework of abuse I can barely comprehend. My phone rang. Margaret, my assistant. I'd forgotten about the emergency board meeting scheduled for this afternoon. Catherine, the news about Mr. Mitchell is everywhere. Several board members are asking if we should postpone. No, I interrupted. We meet as scheduled. Have PR prepare a statement expressing shock at Mr. Mitchell's crimes and sympathy for his victims. Make it clear that our company had no connection to his activities and that we'll cooperate fully with authorities. After handling a dozen more calls, each more urgent than the last, I made a decision. Agent Park, I want to visit Meredith today. Can you arrange it? She looked skeptical, but made some calls. An hour later, I was being driven to the psychiatric facility where Meredith was being held for evaluation. The building was discreet, looking more like a private hospital than a mental health facility. Dr. Amelia Thornton met me in the lobby. Ms. Chen, I have to admit I'm surprised by this request. Meredith has been volatile since learning of her father's death. How is she? Cycling between grief and rage, with periods of complete dissociation. She's asked for you several times, actually. Sometimes to apologize, sometimes to blame you for everything. I'm not sure which version you'll encounter today. I was led through several security checkpoints to a small visiting room. Meredith sat at a table, wearing gray sweats instead of her usual designer clothes. Without makeup, she looked younger, more like the 16-year-old I'd first met than the calculating woman who'd announced her false pregnancy just 2 days ago. She looked up as I entered, and I saw Daniel's green eyes filled with tears. You came. I sat across from her, Dr. Thornton remaining by the door. How are you, Meredith? She laughed, a broken sound. My father is dead. He killed my mother. He's been doing things to me since I was 13, and I helped him. I helped him hurt people. How do you think I am? I think you're a survivor, I said quietly. And I think you're going to need a lot of help to process everything that's happened to you. Why do you care? She leaned forward, searching my face. I tried to destroy your life. I said horrible things. I was going to help him disappear with all that stolen money. Because I remember the girl who used to leave her door open at night, hoping I'd come check on her. The girl who cried at her mother's funeral and let me hold her. That girl is still in there, under all the damage he did. Meredith broke then, sobbing with her whole body. I wanted to comfort her, but didn't know if touch would be welcome or traumatic. Instead, I sat quietly while she cried, occasionally sliding tissues across the table. He started when Mom got sick, she said finally, voice raw. Said I needed to be strong for the family, that he needed me. By the time I understood it was wrong, I was in too deep. He had videos, photos. Said if I told anyone, he'd release them and everyone would know I was disgusting. You were a child. He was the adult. This is not your fault. But I chose to help him. With the money, with driving you away. I chose that. You chose survival within a sick system he created. That's not the same as being culpable. She looked at me then, really looked at me. He picked you because you were strong. Said breaking someone like you would be the ultimate proof of his superiority. But you didn't break. You left. You survived. So will you, I said firmly. It will be hard. There will be legal consequences for your choices, but you're 19. You have a lifetime ahead to become someone different. The FBI found his records, she said quietly. All those girls. Some of them have daughters now. He was planning. She trailed off, unable to finish. I felt sick, thinking about what Daniel might have planned, the generational trauma he could have caused. But he's gone now. He can't hurt anyone else. I knew about some of them, Meredith admitted. Not all, but some. I should have said something. I should have protected them. You couldn't even protect yourself, I reminded her gently. Don't take on guilt that belongs to him. Dr. Thornton stepped forward. I think that's enough for today. Meredith needs to rest. As I stood to leave, Meredith grabbed my hand. Will you come back? I squeezed gently before letting go. If you want me to. I don't deserve your forgiveness. This isn't about forgiveness. Yet. This is about survival. We'll deal with forgiveness when you're stronger. The drive back to my apartment was quiet, my mind processing the conversation. Meredith had a long road ahead. Legal battles, psychological treatment, the challenge of rebuilding an identity outside of Daniel's influence. But seeing her broken and young and sorry had shifted something in me. The anger remained, but it was directed where it belonged, at the man who'd orchestrated all this pain. My apartment had become a command center in my absence. Margaret had arrived with a team, setting up laptops and phones to handle the crisis from here rather than the office. The news was playing on multiple screens, each channel covering a different angle of the scandal. The board meeting went well, Margaret reported. Unanimous support for your leadership. Stock took an initial hit but is already recovering. Clients are expressing confidence in the company's stability. I nodded, grateful for her efficiency. Any word from Daniel's lawyers? His estate attorney called. You're named in the will, apparently. He wants to meet Monday to discuss the implications. I laughed bitterly. Of course I am. Even dead, he's trying to manipulate the situation. The weekend passed in a blur of legal meetings, PR strategy sessions, and carefully managed media appearances. I gave one exclusive interview to a respected journalist, laying out the facts clearly. I had been deceived by a master manipulator who had fooled many people over many years. I was cooperating fully with authorities and would use this experience to help other victims of similar crimes. Monday morning, I sat in the estate attorney's office, Linda beside me, as he explained Daniel's final manipulation. He's left everything to you, the attorney said, clearly uncomfortable. The houses, the legitimate investments, all of it. The letter accompanying the will states that you should use it to make amends for his crimes. And Meredith? I asked. Nothing. He specifically disinherits her, claiming she's already received more than she deserves. The cruelty of it took my breath away. Even in death, Daniel was punishing his daughter for the crimes he'd forced her to participate in. I won't accept it, I said immediately. Find a way to put it all in trust for his victims. Let them decide what justice looks like. The attorney looked relieved. That can be arranged, though it will take time to identify and verify all the victims mentioned in his confession. What about the stolen funds? Linda asked. Being tracked by federal investigators. Most will be returned to the clients he defrauded. But Ms. Chen, the legitimate assets are substantial. Even after settlements, we're talking about millions. Millions built on a foundation of abuse and manipulation. Create a foundation, I decided, for victims of grooming and financial abuse. Use his money to undo the damage he caused. That afternoon, I visited Meredith again. Her reaction to being disinherited was not what I expected. Good, she said firmly. I don't want his money. I don't want anything from him except distance. I'm setting up a foundation, I told her. You'll have access to whatever you need for treatment, education, starting over. Not because of him, but because it's the right thing to do. She was quiet for a long moment. I've been thinking about the others, the girls he hurt. I want to help them somehow. Maybe testify if any of them press charges. I know things, things that might help them get justice. That's brave, I said, meaning it. It's the least I can do. We talked for another hour about safer topics, books she was reading, the therapy dog program at the facility, her tentative plans to eventually study psychology. With each visit, I saw more of the girl she might have been without Daniel's influence, the woman she might still become. As I left the facility, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, tired of reporters and curiosity seekers, but something made me pick up. Is this Catherine Chen? The voice was young, nervous. Yes. My name is Amy Morrison. I think Daniel Mitchell was my father. I stopped walking, my hand tightening on the phone. Amy, where are you? I'm at Columbia University. My mom worked for Mr. Mitchell 20 years ago. She never told me who my father was, but after seeing the news, the timeline, can we meet? Another victim. Another life shaped by Daniel's crimes. Yes, I said. We can meet. And Amy? Whatever you're feeling right now, it's valid. All of it. Over the next weeks, more calls came. More children Daniel had fathered and abandoned. More women he'd manipulated and discarded. The foundation took shape quickly, funded by his estate and my own contributions. We provided legal support, therapy, education funds, whatever each victim needed to reclaim their life. Meredith slowly improved, beginning the long process of separating her identity from her father's influence. She testified in several civil cases, her courage helping other victims find their own. We developed an odd relationship, not quite stepmother and daughter, not quite friends, but something uniquely ours, forged in shared survival. The divorce was finalized on a rainy Tuesday, anticlimactic after everything else. I legally reclaimed my maiden name and felt a weight lift that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. That evening, I stood once again at my apartment window, looking out at the city lights. My phone rang, another potential victim reaching out for help. I answered as I always did now, ready to listen, to support, to help build something positive from the wreckage Daniel had left behind. "This is Catherine," I said. "Tell me your story." Because that's what we did now. We told our stories, bore witness to each other's pain, and slowly, carefully, built new narratives of survival and strength. Daniel had thought breaking me would be his greatest achievement. Instead, surviving him had become mine, not just for myself, but for all the lives he'd tried to destroy. The city sparkled below, full of secrets and stories, pain and possibility. I had been broken and rebuilt, betrayed and reborn, and I was still here, still standing, still fighting. That was the ultimate revenge, not just surviving, but thriving, and bringing others into the light with me. 6 months after Daniel's death, I stood in a conference room facing 12 women and 3 men who had all been victims of his manipulation. Amy Morrison sat in the front row, her resemblance to Daniel unmistakable now that I knew to look for it. Beside her, a woman in her 40s clutched a tissue box. Sarah Hendricks, Daniel's first known victim, the 15-year-old he'd tutored all those years ago. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady despite the emotion in the room. "I know this isn't easy, but your courage in being here, in sharing your stories, is what's going to make real change possible." The Mitchell Foundation had been operational for 3 months, but this was our first group meeting. Individual therapy and support had been provided, but Dr. Thornton had suggested that some victims might benefit from knowing they weren't alone. "I've spent 23 years thinking I was crazy," Sarah said suddenly. "That I'd imagined the whole thing, or that I'd somehow seduced him. My parents didn't believe me when I tried to tell them. Said Mr. Mitchell was too respectable, too good to our family." She looked around the room. "Seeing all of you here, knowing I wasn't the only one, it's like I can finally breathe." Others began sharing, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Stories of grooming that started with tutoring sessions, or internships, of gifts that came with strings attached, of photographs used as blackmail, of pregnancies terminated in secret. Each testimony, another piece in the horrifying puzzle of Daniel's crimes. Amy raised her hand like she was still in class. "What about Meredith? I know she's not here, but is she okay?" The room tensed. Meredith's role was complicated. Victim and perpetrator both, and opinions among the group were divided. "She's in a residential treatment program," I said carefully. "Making progress. She's expressed a desire to meet with anyone who wants to speak with her, but only when her therapists believe she's ready, and only if the other person is willing." "I want to meet her," Amy said quietly. "We're sisters, technically. Half-sisters. And from what you've told us, she never had a chance to be normal. Neither of us did." After the meeting, I found myself in the Foundation's office, a space we'd leased downtown, far from any of Daniel's former business dealings. Linda was there, reviewing legal documents with our growing team of lawyers. So many civil cases, so many women finally seeking justice they'd been denied. "The forensic accountants found another account," Linda reported. "Cayman Islands, another 3 million. Add it to the Foundation," I said automatically. We'd been finding hidden money for months, Accounts in Switzerland, the Caymans, Panama. Each discovery, another reminder of how long Daniel had been planning. His escape. "Catherine?" Linda set down her papers. "You need to take a break. You've been running nonstop for 6 months. The foundation is established. The victims are getting help. When was the last time you did something just for yourself?" I tried to remember and couldn't. Every day had been filled with lawyers, therapists, victims, and the endless administration of undoing Daniel's damage. My own therapy appointments had been squeezed between foundation meetings. My company was running smoothly, but I'd barely set foot in my actual office. "Meredith has her evaluation next week," I said instead of answering. "The prosecutors need to decide whether to charge her as an accomplice or treat her solely as a victim." "And you'll be there?" "She asked me to be." Linda sighed. "Catherine, at some point you need to stop being everyone's savior and just be yourself again." That night, alone in my apartment, I considered Linda's words. Who was I outside of this tragedy? For 6 months, I'd defined myself in opposition to Daniel. Where he destroyed, I rebuilt. Where he lied, I revealed truth. Where he stole, I gave back. But that was still letting him define me, just in reverse. I poured a glass of wine and sat at my piano, an instrument I hadn't touched since before my marriage. My fingers found familiar keys, playing a piece I'd learned in college. Before success, before Daniel, before any of this. The music came haltingly at first, then with growing confidence. This was who I'd been once. Someone who played piano badly but enthusiastically, who read mystery novels and hiking on weekends. My phone buzzed. Margaret, with a reminder about tomorrow's board meeting at my actual company. I'd been a ghost there, present in name, but not in spirit. My executives had stepped up admirably, but it wasn't fair to them or to the business I'd built. The next morning, I walked into my company's headquarters for the first time in months. Employees did double takes seeing me, and I realized how much I'd isolated myself in the foundation work. My office was exactly as I'd left it, Margaret having maintained it perfectly. "Welcome back," she said simply, handing me a coffee prepared exactly how I liked it. The board meeting was a revelation. The company hadn't just survived my absence, it had thrived. New contracts, innovative projects, a culture of empowerment that had emerged as executives took on more responsibility. They'd worried I would want to reassert control, but instead I found myself proud of what they'd accomplished. "I want to restructure," I announced. "Promote from within, create more autonomous divisions. You've proven you don't need me hovering. Let's make that official." After the meeting, I sat with my CFO, Marcus, who'd been with me since the company's founding. "How are you really doing, Catherine?" he asked when we were alone. "I don't know," I admitted. "I've been so focused on fixing Daniel's mess that I haven't thought about what comes next for me." Maybe that's your answer. Stop fixing and start living. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call. Robert Chen, no relation despite the shared name, introduced himself as a documentary filmmaker. "I'm not interested in sensationalizing what happened," he said quickly, "but I think there's an important story here about institutional failures, about how predators like Daniel Mitchell operate in plain sight. Would you be willing to be interviewed?" My first instinct was to refuse. But then I thought about Sarah Hendricks, who'd tried to report Daniel 23 years ago and been dismissed, about all the warning signs that had been ignored or explained away. "I'll think about it," I said. Meredith's evaluation took place in a sterile government building. Prosecutors on one side, her legal team on the other. She sat between them looking small and young, though she'd gained weight in treatment and lost the hollow look that had haunted her eyes. I testified about what I'd witnessed, careful to separate facts from speculation. Yes, she had participated in trying to drive me away. Yes, she had made false claims, but I also spoke about the girl I'd known before, the evidence of grooming, the systematic destruction of her ability to see her situation clearly. Do you believe Meredith Mitchell was capable of meaningful consent in her relationship with her father? The prosecutor asked. No, I said firmly. I believe she was a child when the abuse began, and that every choice she made afterward was within the framework of that abuse. That doesn't excuse the harm she caused, but it does explain it. Meredith met my eyes then, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she mouthed silently. The evaluation concluded with a recommendation for continued treatment rather than criminal charges, contingent on Meredith's cooperation with ongoing investigations and her commitment to making amends where possible. Afterward, we sat in a small cafe near the courthouse, the first time we'd been together outside of institutional settings. I've been thinking about changing my name, Meredith said, stirring her coffee endlessly. Not just my last name. Everything. Start completely fresh. That's understandable. Dr. Thornton thinks I should wait. Process more before making big decisions. She paused. I've been accepted to college. Online programs for now, but it's a start. Psychology major. Following in Dr. Thornton's footsteps? Maybe. Or maybe just trying to understand how I let it happen. How I became someone who could do what I did. She looked at me directly. Do you think I can ever be normal? I think normal is overrated, I said honestly. But I think you can be healthy. Happy eventually. It'll take work. Amy wants to meet me, she said quietly. My half-sister. There are others too. Kids he abandoned. At least I had him, as sick as that sounds. You had an abuser who happened to be your father. They had absence. Neither is enviable. We parted with tentative plans to meet again, to continue building whatever strange relationship we were developing. As I watched her walk away, I thought about forgiveness, not as absolution, but as a release of the anger that bound me to the past. That evening, I called Robert Chen and agreed to the documentary interview. Not for sensation, but for education. The world needed to understand how men like Daniel operated, how institutions protected them, how victims were silenced, and complicit actors were created. The interview lasted 3 days. Filmed in the foundation, offices with breaks when emotions overwhelmed. I spoke about the marriage, the discovery, the aftermath. But more importantly, I talked about the systemic failures, the law firms that had refused to look too closely at Daniel's activities, the business partners who'd dismissed concerns, the social structures that made his victims feel unheard. What would you say to someone in a similar situation? Robert asked near the end. Trust your instincts, I said. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't let respectability or success blind you to red flags. And know that leaving is not failure, it's survival. The documentary would take months to complete, but already I felt lighter for having told the story fully, publicly, without shame. A year to the day after leaving Daniel, I stood in my apartment preparing for an entirely different kind of meeting. My company was launching a new initiative, partnerships with women's shelters and advocacy groups, using our business expertise to help survivors achieve financial independence. Margaret had outdone herself with the presentation materials. Marcus had run the numbers twice, ensuring we could maintain profitability while dedicating resources to the cause. My board had unanimously approved, some even sharing their own stories of friends or family members who could have benefited from such programs. As I reviewed my notes one final time, my phone rang. Amy Morrison's name appeared on the screen. Catherine, I wanted you to know, I met with Meredith yesterday. It was hard, but good. We're going to try regular meetings, maybe build some kind of relationship. I'm glad, Amy. You both deserve to have family that isn't defined by him. Also, I got the scholarship, the foundation scholarship. I'll be able to finish my degree without loans. Her voice broke slightly. I wanted to thank you for everything. After we hung up, I thought about the ripple effects of trauma and healing. Daniel had spent decades creating victims. Now those victims were creating networks of support, chains of recovery that extended far beyond what he'd damaged. The launch event was held in my company's auditorium, packed with business leaders, advocates, and survivors. As I took the stage, I saw familiar faces in the audience. Sarah Hendricks, now a vocal advocate for statute of limitation reform. Amy, preparing for her senior year. Even Meredith, attending with Dr. Thornton's permission and support. A year ago, my life imploded. I began, speaking without notes. I discovered that my marriage was built on lies, that the man I'd trusted was a predator, that the stepdaughter I'd tried to love had been destroyed by someone who should have protected her. It would have been easy to let that implosion define me. I paused, making eye contact with the survivors I knew in the audience. But destruction can clear ground for new growth. Today, we're not here to talk about what was taken from us. We're here to talk about what we're building together. The presentation went smoothly, outlining our programs, our partnerships, our commitment to long-term support. But the real power came from the survivors who spoke. Women who'd escaped abuse and rebuilt careers, who'd transformed their pain into purpose. As the event concluded, I found myself surrounded by people wanting to contribute, to partner, to help. The program we'd hoped might help dozens would clearly impact hundreds, maybe thousands. Later, as the auditorium emptied, Meredith approached me hesitantly. I wanted to say thank you for including me, for not shutting me out. You're a survivor, too, I reminded her. Your story matters. I've been thinking, she said. When I finish my degree, if I make it that far, I want to work with victims who were also made into accomplices. The ones who feel too guilty to seek help. There have to be others like me. I think that's a worthy goal. She smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her since before everything collapsed. Dr. Thornton says I might actually be good at it, that my experience, as horrible as it was, could help others. As I drove home that night, I thought about the strange turns life takes. A year ago, I'd been Catherine Mitchell, trophy wife to a successful businessman trying to stepmother a difficult teenager. Now I was Catherine Chen again, but transformed. Not just a businesswoman, but an advocate. Not just a survivor, but a builder of survival networks. My apartment welcomed me with its familiar quiet. I poured wine, sat at my piano, and played. Better than before. The regular practice having restored skills I'd thought lost. The music filled the space. Neither sad nor happy, but simply present. Simply real. My phone sat silent on the counter. No crisis calls tonight. No urgent legal matters. Just peace, hard-won and carefully maintained. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. More victims coming forward, legal battles continuing, the ongoing work of healing and justice. But tonight, I was simply Catherine, playing piano in her apartment, building a life that was entirely her own. The photo of Daniel and me from our wedding had long been destroyed, but I kept one picture from that time, Meredith and me at her high school graduation, both of us smiling, unaware of what was to come but genuinely happy in that moment. I'd been wrong that day in thinking I understood what family meant, what trust looked like, what love could justify. But I'd been right about one thing. Meredith had needed someone to see her as more than Daniel's creation. We both had. The piano keys felt warm under my fingers as I transitioned to a new piece, one I'd been learning recently. It was complex, requiring both hands to work independently, yet in harmony, a metaphor that wasn't lost on me. Recovery and justice, healing and accountability, moving forward and honoring the past. All necessary, all happening simultaneously, all part of the strange symphony that my life had become. As the last notes faded, I sat in the silence, comfortable with both the music and its absence. Tomorrow would come with its demands and revelations. But tonight, I was whole. Not despite what had happened, but because I'd chosen to transform it into something meaningful. The city lights twinkled beyond my windows, each one representing lives I'd never know, stories I'd never hear. But somewhere out there, women were leaving dangerous situations because they'd heard it was possible. Somewhere, victims were becoming survivors because they'd seen it could be done. And here, in this apartment that had sheltered me when I fled, I was proof that you could lose everything and still win. Not by destroying those who'd hurt you, but by building something they could never tear down. A life of purpose, connection, and the kind of strength that comes from knowing exactly who you are. I closed the piano lid gently and prepared for bed, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. The investigation continued, the foundation grew, the survivors multiplied. But Catherine Chen slept peacefully, no longer defined by what had been done to her, but by what she'd chosen to do next. 2 years had passed since that shattering night when my world imploded. The foundation had grown beyond my wildest expectations, helping over 3,000 survivors across the country. My company had become a model for corporate social responsibility, and the documentary about Daniel's crimes had won awards for its unflinching look at institutional failures. But today wasn't about any of that. Today, Meredith was graduating, with her bachelor's degree in psychology. I sat in the auditorium among other proud families, watching as she walked across the stage. She'd legally changed her name to Meredith Chen, taking my surname in a gesture that had moved me to tears when she'd told me. The adoption had been her idea, a way to formally sever ties with Daniel and create a new family bond based on choice, rather than blood or marriage. Meredith Chen, magna cum laude, the announcer called. She looked radiant in her cap and gown, healthy in a way that had seemed impossible 2 years ago. As she accepted her diploma, her eyes found mine in the crowd. We smiled at each other, not the fraught, complicated expressions of our early relationship, but the genuine warmth of family we'd chosen to become. Amy sat beside me, having flown in from California where she was completing her medical residency. "She looks happy," Amy whispered. "She is," I confirmed. "We both are." After the ceremony, we gathered at a restaurant. A small group, but a meaningful one. Dr. Thornton had come, along with Sarah Hendricks, who'd become a mentor to Meredith. Marcus and Margaret from my company. Linda, who'd guided us through legal nightmares and emerged as a friend. Even Robert Chen joined us, having become part of our extended chosen family through the documentary process. "I have an announcement," Meredith said once everyone had champagne. "I've been accepted to Columbia's clinical psychology doctoral program, full scholarship from the foundation." The table erupted in congratulations. I caught her eye and mouthed, "I'm proud of you," watching her beam in response. "There's more," she continued, glancing at Amy. "Amy and I are getting an apartment together in New York. Sisters making up for lost time." Amy raised her glass. "To new beginnings and chosen families. To survival," Sarah added. "To justice," Linda chimed in. "To healing," Dr. Thornton contributed. I raised my own glass. "To all of us, for proving that love isn't about blood or law or obligation. It's about showing up, doing the work, and choosing each other even when it's hard." As we toasted, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. The woman who'd fled her house in Connecticut 2 years ago could never have imagined this moment, surrounded by people who'd transformed shared trauma into an unbreakable bond. Later, as the party wound down, Meredith pulled me aside. "I need to tell you something. I've met someone, another survivor actually. We met in group therapy." "That's wonderful," I said, meaning it. "Tell me about them." "Her name is Elena. She's an artist, works with art therapy programs for kids who've experienced trauma. She understands. My history without me having to explain or apologize. Meredith paused. I wanted you to be the first to know. You taught me that real love is possible after everything. I hugged her tightly. This young woman who'd traveled such a difficult path to reach this moment of hope and possibility. Also, she said, pulling back with a mischievous smile that reminded me she was still only 21. I think it's time you started dating again, too. Marcus has been making hard eyes at you all through dinner. I laughed, swatting her arm playfully. Focus on your own love life, young lady. But as I glanced back at the table where Marcus was deep in conversation with Robert about ethical business practices, I admitted to myself that Meredith might have a point. 2 years was long enough to define myself solely through survival and service. The next morning, I stood in my office at the foundation, looking at the wall of photos. Survivors who'd shared their stories, volunteers who'd dedicated time, donors who'd made our work possible. Daniel's estate had long been exhausted, but the foundation thrived on new support from people who understood that healing required more than just money. A knock at the door interrupted my reflection. Come in. To my surprise, it was Marcus. I hope I'm not interrupting. I wanted to talk to you about something. Of course. Coffee? As I poured 2 cups, he seemed uncharacteristically nervous. Catherine, we've known each other for 15 years. We've built companies together, weathered crises together. You've been my closest friend and most trusted business partner. Marcus, you're scaring me. Are you quitting? He laughed. No, quite the opposite. I'm wondering if you might consider having dinner with me. Not as business partners, but as something more. I set down my coffee cup carefully, my mind racing. Marcus, I'm complicated. My history. I know your history, he interrupted gently. I've watched you transform unimaginable pain into purpose. I've seen you rebuild not just your own life, but dozens of others. Your history doesn't scare me, Catherine. It's part of what makes you extraordinary. I studied him, this man who'd stood by me through everything, who'd never once made me feel damaged or defined by Daniel's crimes. One dinner, I agreed, but we take things slowly. His smile was worth the leap of faith. 6 months later, I stood in a different kind of gathering. The foundation was hosting its first national conference, bringing together survivors, advocates, therapists, and policymakers. Meredith was presenting her research on trauma recovery in cases involving victim-perpetrator dynamics. Amy was leading a panel on medical professionals' role in identifying abuse. Sarah Hendricks was keynoting on legislative reform, and I was about to announce the Foundation's biggest initiative yet, a network of safe houses in 20 cities, providing immediate shelter and long-term support for those escaping abusive situations. Marcus stood beside me at the podium, our relationship having evolved slowly but surely into something deep and real. He'd become my partner in every sense, understanding that my work with the foundation wasn't just a job, but a calling. Before we begin, I said into the microphone, looking out at the packed auditorium, I want to share something. 3 years ago, my stepdaughter told me she was pregnant with her father's baby. It was a lie designed to destroy my marriage and drive me away. It worked, but not in the way they intended. The room was silent. Hundreds of faces turned toward me. That lie freed me from a marriage built on deception. It revealed crimes that might have continued for years. It connected me with all of you, survivors who refuse to let trauma have the final word in your stories. I felt Meredith's presence beside me before I saw her, joining me at the podium. That stepdaughter was me, she said, taking the microphone. I was 19, groomed since 13, convinced that destroying Catherine's life was somehow protecting the sick relationship I had with my father. I've spent 3 years in therapy, in recovery, in the hard work of becoming someone new. She looked at me, tears in her eyes. Catherine could have destroyed me. I had participated in crimes, told horrible lies, tried to ruin her life. Instead, she saved mine. She showed me that redemption was possible, that victims who become accomplices can find their way back to humanity. Amy joined us, then Sarah, then dozens of others, filling the stage. We are not defined by what was done to us, I continued, or even by what we did in our trauma. We are defined by what we choose to do next. That evening, at the conference gala, I watched Meredith dance with Elena, both young women radiant with the kind of joy that comes from fighting through darkness to find light. Amy was deep in conversation with fellow medical professionals about implementing screening protocols. Sarah was surrounded by legislators, passionately advocating for change. "You built something beautiful from something terrible," Marcus said, appearing at my elbow with champagne. "We all did," I corrected. "That's the only way it works. Together." Robert Chen approached with his camera crew, documenting the event, for a follow-up to his documentary. "Catherine, any final thoughts for the film?" I considered the question, thinking about the journey from that shattering night to this moment of celebration and purpose. Just that survival isn't a destination. It's a journey we take together. And sometimes the very worst moments of our lives become the foundation for the best work we'll ever do. As the evening continued, I found myself on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. Meredith found me there, Elena tactfully giving us a moment alone. "I never thanked you properly," she said quietly, "for believing I could be better than what I'd done." "You thanked me by becoming who you are now," I replied. "That's thanks enough." "I love you, Mom," she said simply. It was the first time she'd called me that since the adoption, and the word hung between us, precious and hard-won. "I love you too, sweetheart." We stood together in comfortable silence, two women who'd found family in the most unlikely circumstances. Inside, music played and voices rose in conversation about changing the world. But here, in this quiet moment, the world had already changed. One choice, one act of faith, one decision to build rather than destroy at a time. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. Another survivor reached out. 17 years old, needs immediate help. I showed it to Meredith. "Ready to get back to work?" She smiled, the determined expression I'd come to know so well settling on her features. Always. We walked back into the gala together, ready to face whatever came next. The work would never be finished. There would always be another survivor to help, another system to change, another life to rebuild. But that was okay. We had found our purpose in the ruins of our trauma and built something unbreakable. As I moved through the crowd, greeting supporters and survivors alike, I caught my reflection in a mirror. The woman looking back was older than the one who'd fled Connecticut 3 years ago, marked by experience but not broken by it. She wore confidence like armor and compassion like jewelry. She was Catherine Chen, survivor, advocate, mother by choice, and builder of bridges between darkness and light. The party continued around me, a celebration of survival and strength, of justice delayed but not denied. And at the center of it all, a truth that had taken me years to understand. Sometimes the most devastating lies reveal the most powerful truths, and the families we choose are stronger than the ones we're born into. The gala ended, but our work continued. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new survivors seeking help, new battles to fight. But tonight had proven what I'd always suspected, that healing multiplied when shared, that strength grew from vulnerability, and that the best revenge against those who tried to destroy us was to build something beautiful from the ashes they left behind. 3 years after my world ended, I had helped create a new one, and it was good. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.